Elon Musk caused more than controversy for clearly doing the Nazi salutes at the pre-inauguration rally for Donald Trump. People tried to defend him, claiming he's awkward and autistic, and it was actually a wave, not a fascist salute. Well, how are people going to spin this?
Well, first of all, I wanted to really say that I'm very excited for the AfD, and I think you are really the best hope for Germany. I think some things that something I think that is just very important is that people take pride in Germany and being German. This is very important. It's okay to be proud to be German. This is a very important principle. It's okay. It's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and not to lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything. The German people are sort of really an ancient nation, goes back thousands of years. So I think there's frankly too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, or even let alone their parents, their great grandparents, maybe even. And we should be optimistic and excited about a future for Germany.
Yes, that is Elon Musk attending the neo-Nazi party AfD, Alternative for Deutschland's rally, making a speech about multiculturalism, diluting Germany's culture, and there being too much focus on past guilt. Kevin, I don't see how anyone can defend Musk and claim that he's not a Nazi or a fascist, but he's just concerned about immigration.
How dare you? He could have been talking about any part of German history. He could have been talking about the Napoleonic era.
How dare I?
End of the Holy Roman Empire, anything. He could be. Oh no, he's talking about the Nazis. He's just talking about that one. 12-year, just over 12-year period of Nazi rule. That's literally the thing. He did a Nazi salute, which, by the way, don't call it the Roman salute. There is literally no evidence of it ever being a thing that the Romans did. It was invented by people, artists largely in the Renaissance, who painted Romans as having done that. But regardless of the historic inaccuracy of that, he did the Nazi salute. Like, if you want to just say, my heart goes out to you, just go, oh, heart, love heart goes out to you, heart goes out to you. He chose the one physical action which everyone thinks, oh, that's Nazi. That's a Nazi thing, because that's exactly what he's doing. He's doing the plausible deniability thing of pretending like, oh, I'm autistic. I know lots of autistic people. They don't go around zig heiling. That's not a thing that happens. There's no physical tick, as far as I'm aware, that even leads to that. So he's just talking rubbish, and then follows that up with speaking via a video link, as you showed there, to the Alternative for Deutschland party, which is just a straightforward neo-Nazi party, a party with a long history of connection to other neo-Nazi groups. Its members, there are just replete examples of them engaging in Holocaust denial, which is another topic we'll get on to shortly. And all kinds of violent extremist connections and all the rest of it. They're awful. They're absolutely awful. The fact that even if he'd just said to them that you're the best hope for Germany, that alone would have been enough for me to suggest that he's a neo-Nazi. The fact that he starts going on about things being diluted, that multiculturalism dilutes what the bloodline, Elon? Is that what you're talking about there? It's a bit on the nose, mate.
I mean, even when they say about diluting culture, I mean, clearly some fascists mean literally the bloodline, and I'm sure. Well, I mean, I don't know whether Musk is referring to that or not, but given that I think he's a Nazi, yeah. I think he probably is. But even those who aren't referring to bloodlines, but they mean in terms of culture, how was culture being diluted? Because think about our country, right? Over the last 60 years, immigration has massively increased, but has the British identity changed? No, of course, it's more of a melting pot. There have been things that have been added to the British identity. But if you think about traditional British culture, drinking tea, having a pint at the pub, The
Casual
monarchy, we still have a
racism,
monarchy.
violence. Yeah.
Yeah, there's also that. None of that has really changed. It's still here, even after, let's be honest, an influx of migration.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed. I would say it's added to it,
Yeah.
and in some in good ways. I think Britain being a multicultural society has only enriched it. I mean, I saw a famous, not a famous picture, but someone photoshopped this brilliant image. I think it was during Brexit. When they photoshopped the high street, and it was just basically fish and chips on every shop. Just chips, fish and chips. Very boring stuff. I like the fact that there's multiculturalism. So it has changed our culture, enriched it, but it's not diluted what they would see as the sort of native culture. It hasn't.
Well,
So it's a complete lie anyway.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, literally, the number one thing you mentioned there, drinking tea. Tea comes from China and India.
Well, there you
There
go.
was a specific
Exactly.
reason why that became a tradition, and it's because we
Yes.
went there and stole their stuff.
Mm.
Literally, like, you can't invade all of the rest of the world, take on its cultural affectations, and then say that you're pure or that you've got some
Yep.
completely isolated nativist concept of what you are. No, we are a nation of comings and goings. You can tell that from the place names. Some of them come from Scandinavia. Some of them come from the jutes of places like what is now Denmark. Some of it's German. We've got lots of French influences. We've got Celtic. There's loads of stuff going on throughout all of that time. And all we've seen in recent times is people from slightly further afield, because again, we went there and sort of invited them, coming in and adding to the culture. And like you say, it hasn't fundamentally changed, but it's adapted in a way that it was always going to, regardless of whether brown people came here or not. Culture does change. Culture does evolve. It moves with the times. We're not all wearing neck ruffs, for instance, because it's not the Tudor period. We're not all wearing, pencil ties because it's not the 1970s. Like, it's not. Things change and develop and move on. The idea that something has to stay and remain exactly as it is ridiculous and not how chronology works or how culture works, and B is fundamentally ridiculous because you're looking at the past through a rose-tinted glass.
Oh, for
Whenever
sure,
they
for
look at
sure.
things like
Yeah.
the 1950s and say, "Well, we want to go back to that time." Oh, you want to go back to the time when the top rate of tax was 90%? Do you, Elon? You sure about that, mate? You sure you want to go back to the time when the top rate of tax would cut your net worth in half, or by the 200 billion? No, I don't think you do. I don't think you do, my friend. Also, just to tackle the kind of historical stuff here, when he mentions the parents and grandparents and great grandparents of these people and how they shouldn't feel guilt for the past, no one is asking anybody to feel guilt for anything that they personally didn't do. What we can say, especially when it comes to things like imperialism, is that if you're still benefiting from that, then do something about that. Are you like give back the cultural artifacts that you stole, or try and financially help the countries that you stole from, and all the rest of it? We do ask that people do that, including, of course, Germany, because it's not just Nazi period for which that's the case. They were involved in imperialism before, and indeed, to a degree, subsequently after that. It's that what Elon is trying to do, and it is sort of bordering on genocide or bordering on Holocaust denial, is pretend that what happened then doesn't matter now. And when he says that you should be proud of being German, are you suggesting, Elon, that the Nazis were guilty of being proud to be German? Because given the fact that they led Germany into the worst situation it has ever faced, I would argue that's not true. That's not remotely true. If you look at the way in which the Nazis killed millions of Germans, they got millions more killed in a war that they started. This is not a thing to be proud of. This is not a thing that they were guilty of, i.e., being proud of being German, because they really weren't. And this is the problem: is that this kind of nationalism, this kind of quote unquote patriotism, is actually kind of a hatred for what your country is, in favor of a thing that you want it to be that it never really has been in the past.
I mean, I love that line. I'm going to touch upon that in a second. But I guess, I mean, it's true, by the way. No one has said you should feel terrible for what your grandparents did.
Yeah.
No one's saying that. But clearly there is still a national shame because, people are educated on it. And I think, right, maybe some people might disagree, but I think there should still be national shame when the worst crime against humanity happened not that long ago. And given the fact that Germany's response in terms of the Holocaust, what some people consider a Holocaust or a genocide, I call it a genocide, but some people call it the Holocaust in Palestine. Um, they clearly don't give a shit about ethnic cleansing there, or even just the rise of the AFD. And I think the fact that the AFD are becoming popular means, well, surely they shouldn't end the national shame, shall we say? I think
Yeah.
if these forces are still coming back, then the guilt hasn't worked. But this is also a mirror from what we hear from British politicians
Yeah.
when they say, well, the left want you to hate this country for what we did in the past in terms of the British Empire. Okay, we did some bad things, but we also did some good things. Well, I mean, it's not quite as easy as that. A lot, 90% of the stuff we did was bad. When you talk about, oh, well, we built the train networks in India. Oh, yeah, we did it out of the goodness of our heart. And there's this sort of pushback there. And it's eerily similar to say, well, Britain shouldn't feel guilty about the British colony,
Yeah.
but we're still benefiting from it. And
Exactly,
if your attitude to the British colony is, okay, it was the past, some things we did were bad, but also I'm against immigration or high amounts of immigration. Well, as Akala said, who's brilliant, by the way, he said these people are just following the wealth. Okay, we have immigrants coming from across the world, from the global south, coming to the UK because we stole their wealth and they're following the wealth.
Well, to quote the great Mohammed Salah, when he went to the British Museum, he was just going there to visit his own stuff. True.
Yes,
As an Egyptian,
precisely.
he was just going to visit the things that we
Yeah.
stole from them. Yeah. I think another point, as an addendum to all of this, the people that are at fault for the rise of parties like Reform or AfD or the Marine Le Pen in France or whoever, I mean, obviously are the people themselves for, putting forward this kind of neo-Nazi filth, but also neoliberalism. And again, that might sound like it's kind of the pat socialist response, I suppose, but it actually is true. If you look at the areas that the AfD do well in, or if you look at the areas of Britain that Reform do well in, it's largely post-industrial areas that have been completely sold down the river by neoliberalism. They haven't seen the benefit of it. If you look at how the AfD, where they do well, it's basically like the Berlin Wall didn't fall, in essence. Financially speaking, East Germany is still an absolute basket case. The unemployment rate is through the roof by comparison to its former West German areas. Um, and that fundamentally has led people into the extreme situation that they find themselves. People don't generally vote for horrific shit like this unless it gets really, really bad. We saw that with the literal OG Nazis. The Weimar Republic was doing quite well until the 1928 financial crash, and then when people started starving, they looked for an extreme solution to their extreme situation. And whilst things aren't as bad now as they were in 1928, 29, 30, they're becoming that bad. They're getting to that place. The financial wealth in Britain is all in London and the southeast. The economy of the rest of the country is worse than that of Alabama. People will vote for extreme solutions if you put them in extreme situations. And neoliberalism has taken the piss out of the working class for so long now that they're looking to solutions that aren't really solutions. They're not actually going to solve the problem, but you can't offer the status quo to people who have no stake in the status quo because they have no future.
If we look recently, we could say that there was a sort of rise of the left and the right around 2015. Of course, it goes further than that, obviously 40 years of neoliberalism. But even recently, you can say 2015, you saw Corbyn rise, the Brexit referendum, people voted to leave because they didn't want the status quo, and nothing's been done. I mean, I would say essentially since 2008, we haven't changed anything. Absolutely nothing. And us socialists on the left predicted this. We said this is what's going to happen if the liberal establishment, if the ruling class stay as it is, and we've been proved right. And it didn't feel good, by the way. I wish I was wrong. I don't want to be in a situation. I wish the liberals, the neoliberals, were my main enemy. But no, it's the fascists.
Well, yeah, but partly because the neoliberals have allowed this
Partly because
situation to happen. So whilst, of course, the fascists are the most direct problem here, long term, something really does, or medium to long term, something needs to be done about neoliberalism, because it will inevitably lead straight back to this situation if unchecked. If you don't allow a pressure valve of basic social democracy, people will go to extremes. Some people will go towards, out there tanky revolutionary stuff, and a lot of people will go to fascism.
There's been a sort of surge of historical revisionism when it comes to the Nazis. I mean, you have people on the right claiming that the Nazis were actually left-wing because the party was called National Socialist. Of course, that obviously means they were socialists. Just how North Korea is a democracy because the ruling party is called the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The Nazis were not socialist or left-wing in any way.
No.
This seems like a ploy to move the spotlight away from the far right, and actually, the danger is the left.
Yeah. They're going to be really surprised when they find out that buffalo wings aren't the wings of buffaloes. Crazy, I know, just because it's in a name, lads. No, the Nazis were not remotely socialist. Even the quote-unquote socialist element, the Strasserite element of that party, was purged in the late 1920s, early 1930s. So by the time they became the government, there was no element of any kind of progressivism, be it economic or otherwise, in that political party. Yeah, they literally were funded massively by organizations like the IG Farben and the Krupp Foundation, Siemens, and various other German industrial moguls funded the Nazi Party in their rise because they were the bulwark to communism. Communism was a genuine threat. It had taken over. There had been communist revolutions in Germany, and they were scared. So they started funding them. Literally, the word privatization was invented to describe the way in which the Nazi Party took publicly owned commercial concerns and sold them to the private industries. Now, they took a lot of those back in hand when it came to total war, but that's a war thing. On that basis, Churchill would be a socialist. So that's not real.
Yeah.
Okay. That's war. That's the way war has always worked. So they weren't socialist. And people trying to retroactively assign that label to them are essentially people who aren't neo-Nazis, because neo-Nazis accept that they were neo-Nazis. And they're not your average conservative. It's people from the right of your average conservative up to the neo-Nazi label, that kind of section of the political spectrum, because they believe a lot of the things that Nazis believe in. They just don't want to have the genocide label attached to them. So they try and say, well, actually, I'm not anywhere near the Nazis because the Nazis are all the way over there, look. And they're trying to distract people by lying.
I mean, we've even had Elon Musk say the Nazis were left-wing, which I find really strange because even the leader of the AfD called the Nazis communist. And it's to say, well, these, I mean, you wouldn't say it out loud, but these...
He literally said Karl Marx was a capitalist because he wrote a book called Capital. So, like, Elon Musk's knowledge of the political state, it just...
I didn't know that.
He did.
I didn't know that. That's
did.
funny.
This was on Twitter years ago now. He literally said Karl Marx is a capitalist. Look at the book he wrote, and it's the book. It's like a photo of the book Capital, which is a critique of capitalism, you stupid cunt.
But it's strange when you hear Musk and the leader of AfD call the Nazis left wing when that's their politics, though. I mean, first of all, they don't like the left. They are Nazis. Okay, they don't overtly say it. So they must know themselves. It's not like Jordan Peterson, who's kind of crazy. He probably actually believes the Nazis were left wing because I just think his brain is completely broken.
Yeah, the Benzos did for that.
Yeah, but when it comes to AfD and Musk, they must know that the Nazis were not left wing because if they were left wing, they wouldn't be Nazis.
Exactly. Yeah, it's for the same reason that Holocaust deniers do Holocaust denial, because very few people actually do outright Holocaust denial, or they do like taking away bits of the Holocaust so that it doesn't seem so bad, so that they can hopefully drive towards doing the same thing again, but like completely. It's that exact same thing. They want to enact many of the nationalist, pro-capitalist, racist, anti-immigrant, xenophobic policies that the Nazis did, but they don't want that stain upon them because they realize that people, when they hear Nazi, when they hear Adolf Hitler, they think evil, and quite rightly, and they don't want that attached to them. Now, you would think any intelligent person would think to themselves, my political ideology is equated with evil. Maybe I'm wrong. No. That's not how the capitalist works. The capitalist says, no, the world is wrong. I must make it conform to my reality.
The link between capital and fascism, it always happens that way. But people like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, they're all weird in their own right. I mean, you kind of have to be a weirdo to get to the position they are. But I wouldn't say that these characters are deranged fascists like Musk. However, they've all fallen in line. Jeff Bezos made sure his Washington Post didn't endorse Kamala Harris, even though they typically endorse the Democrats. That's clearly basically saying we endorse Trump. Bill Gates falling in line with Trump. Mark Zuckerberg basically turning Facebook, and I mean, it's always been a right-wing bullshit machine, but he's going further into that territory. And that's where essentially capital always sides with fascism. I don't think capital necessarily wants fascism, but as you said, there's a historical context of, well, they hate communists more than fascists.
They don't necessarily want fascism because it can be disruptive, as we saw with, the fact that they started wars, which got factories bombed. No one's making money in that situation. They realise, though, that fascism is their final bulwark against socialism. And so when socialism starts doing well, you'll notice lots of dark money starts going towards fascist political parties.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.